Well, it's August and it's time for another release video. Dot 14 should be coming out by now on all platforms. So here is the README for that. We'll just walk through it as quickly and efficiently as possible. There is a lot of things on this list. Let's just go through them. Starting from the bottom, we have Scott has implemented a fix for Genius controllers specifically on the smart receivers. I do not have one of those, but I can sort of explain to you what it was. Let's just assume this is a smart controller, and you had multiple smart receivers. What was happening was the number of pixels that you had on this receiver would get copied down to this receiver or some sort of fashion like that. Even if you didn't have them on there, it was being copied down there, and it would throw off your total number of pixels that you had. It would still output correctly, so you may not even known you had the issue. It would still work properly, but it would incorrectly update the outputs and thereby potentially impacting the number of frames per second. So that was corrected by Scott. Dan fixed up a carryover from .13 when they implemented the new xSchedule file. It was incorrectly registering all zip files on your hard drive as being, xLights related, so that was a mistake and reverted. Check last month's or last release's video on how to do that manually to reset it if that's still an issue. Missing HinksPix data in the tooltip. So again, I don't have HinksPix, but what he's talking about in the visualizer, when you hovered over it, the very last thing under where it says description, there used to be a line there that says HinksPix long range receiver, and it would tell you which one was your long range receiver. That was inadvertently dropped off on the visualizer, so that was been added back on. So Keith did that. Keith has fixed this. If a model import fails, before if you did, coming back to xLights, if you were on the layout and you did an import and you imported a new prop and then you canceled out of it, it would still add something to your layout, which you probably didn't want. So we just don't bother adding that mistake. It's just ignored. And the next one we have, fix export a model can crash if the file create fails. So similarly to that previous one, if you were on a model, you right click, you exported the xLights model. If you couldn't create the file due to some OS failure, it would crash xLights. So that's handled properly now. Something that's you may not have ever noticed, but on looping effects output a blank frame. So if you had a sequence, and I'll just create a quick animation, and if you had, I don't know, let's say a bars effect or whatever, just draw it out. As it's looping through this, repeating the bars effect over and over and over again, it was inputting one single frame at the end of the bars effect, which essentially we black, and that's not what you wanted. I think you could have been able to tell this if you were to say drop the bars effect on, what do I have here? A star, for example, and then I expand the star, expand the strand. So here you go, you can see it's red, white, red, and if I put something just beside it, let's say an on effect, and I put it right next to it, you would actually, if you zoomed in, you would be able to see a black line representing that last frame being black, whereas it's not as seamless. It should be seamless between the red and the white, between the bars and the on effect. So there was one frame that was in there that would cause an issue. Something we found with a crash with a user was they inadvertently had a very large buffer, and what we mean by that is in his layout you have a group, for example, your all house, you have a center offset. So by default it's 400, a grid size, so 400 by 400. I believe that is correct, but he had put in, or somehow managed to put in 5,000 by 5,000 in here, and that was large enough to cause xLights to crash. So rather than crashing now, it'll let you do this, although that's way out of the norm to have values like that big, but it will show you in the log So if you do a tools view log, you would see it complaining about overly large buffer, but it won't crash. So that's the key here, is that it won't crash anymore, and it's up to you to find that in the tools check sequence. Fix issues with canvas mode. I believe this was the correction Dan did to something we found with the adjust effect. So the adjust effect, again, he has it on DMX, which is important for this fix. Moving ahead, if you had a DMX effect here, right, like this, and then you wanted to use the adjust effect, which was added quite a while ago now, probably over a year ago, where you could say, I want to adjust all of the DMX effects by adding, maybe I want to add 30 to all of my pan channel, which I think is panel 3, and I have 16 channels in my channel head. It was not blending properly, i.e. it was not applying this adjustment effect. This adjustment effect counts on and uses the canvas effect, and it was not working properly due to an earlier change a couple releases ago with the canvas mode. So there's a special case to handle a DMX buffer, which I learned is slightly different than a normal buffer. They have a keep it separately, and needed to fix that. Something we found just before release of 14 was with this new feature with the xSQZ file or xSQZ file, if you double clicked it, sometimes it would give you a whole bunch of warnings that model does not exist, et cetera, et cetera. What we found was if you created sequences that were stored in something other than your show folder. So for instance, if you had a sequence in 2023 test folder 5/sequences/ Mariah Carey, blah, 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 it would cause an issue because it didn't properly set the show folder, and it would give you all these warnings. So Keith has fixed that up. So at this point, we think the double clicking of the XSQ file should be working fine for everything now. Add all layers for the custom model dialog. Somebody pointed this out as an issue where if in 3D layouts, if you had a custom model, I'm not sure, this is the one actually, because this was what he reported. If you went to model data, click on this, by default, it was setting up the number of layers. So I guess it was something else, sorry. So if you had a depth of, say, assuming this is a 3D model, this depth of 10, it should create 10 different layers. What was actually happening was it was only going to show you the number of layers that you currently used. So if you'd only used 5 of them, it would only show 5, even though you said the depth was 10. So now it's correctly going to show you 10 layers, regardless of how many you have used. So not too many people ran into that, but that was the issue, and it was fixed. Keith has added a new product available from pixelcontroller.com. Hope I got that right. A new PyCap v2. You can feel free to look that up. That should say reuse existing shader files. So maybe you didn't know about this, but there is an option here, and we don't really encourage you using it unless you really have to. It is what to do. Where is it? Under file? No, I'm so bad at this. Tools, cleanup file location. So the purpose of cleanup file location is to find any files that are in the currently open sequence that are not under your show folder and make a copy of them in your show folder. So ideally fixing up all those mistakes where you may have unzipped a file in the olden days and imported a sequence from a file that was in the downloads directory or something like that. Anyway, a side effect for that was it would create multiple copies of a shader file. So if you had a sequence and master view, you had a shader file like here, and I'm going to just browse and shaders, and this one here. Now that's in my show folder, so this is not really a good example of it. But if you had the same shader over and over and over again, wherever you had it in your sequence, if it was in, say, downloads here, it would create Black Cherry Cosmos 1, Black Cherry Cosmos 2, Black Cherry Cosmos 3, even though they're the exact same shader. So instead of creating multiple copies of the same shader, it is going to create one and use the same one over and over again. Now, it is not going to do the same with an image. The reason being is we don't know if Santa.jpg is the same as Santa.jpg that's sitting in your images folder. It could be somebody else's sequences called Santa.jpg. So unless we get really down nitty gritty and checking to verify that the exact same image is being used, then we're just going to assume that they're all unique images and creating 1_1_2_3. But with shaders, we are pretty confident that they are the one and the same shader. So it was only addressed to eliminate duplicating shaders. Keith has added a new icon because in that new feature that was added, it had the Nutcracker icon. So now the Nutcracker icon now has a little zipper added to his image so that you can tell in your file explorer which ones are sequences versus package sequences. I'm not sure how easy this is to see, and maybe Keith will make another update, but there is a little zipper icon right across his chin. It's really, really hard to tell the difference. Maybe people have got better eyes than I have, better ways of seeing it, but that is what he was talking about. Can I make that icon bigger? Maybe I can. Maybe that would help. There it is. There it is. You can see the little zipper icon there, so you can tell the difference between a package sequence versus a normal sequence. So maybe needs a little tweaking there, but that's the idea behind that one. Dan and I have both added a feature or updated features to generate the node names. So I'll show you what that's all about. In the moving head, if you haven't, loaded in your moving head from a vendor's version, you might have put these in by hand to make things easy to understand. Ideally, you have all these node names filled in for you. And there's a button here that says generate node names. Now, first of all, if it's red, that means it's not valid. Apparently, this is no longer valid. You can't put a slash in there. But if I click on generate node names, it goes out there and looks at what you have set for pan, pan fine, tilt, tilt fine, color wheel, and shutter, and places those names in there appropriately. Saves you from having to type them all in, or at least it double checks and verifies it. So that's available on this dialog, and as well as the skull model dialog. So be sure and check those out if you need to. Add validation to the presets on the preset channel. So in the moving head, you have the ability to add presets, or what Scott's actually renamed them now. They actually called fixed channels. So these fixed channels will get inserted anytime you add an on type effect in front of your moving head, and I'll show you that in a second. So anyway, the validation is now says you can't put in 22 here if you've only got 16 channels, because there's just not enough. So we put in 2, for example, and in my case, I have channel 6. I always want it to be 16 because that is my circle gobo. And so if I have that, if I go into the sequencer, if I drop moving head effect here, it could be either DMX or the new moving head effect. But if I do a DMX effect here on moving head, insert a layer above, and I drop any kind of on effect. First of all, if you didn't know, this will create red, green, blue moving head for that DMX, but at the same time, it'll insert on channel 16, on channel 6, for me, it will insert the value it needs for the gobo. So I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little shading here indicating that it is being set for me in a fixed channel. So that's the fixed channel. We just added some validation to make sure that you don't put any wacky numbers in there that could cause issues. Again, sorry guys, I don't know a lot about the servo stuff. Dan has been doing a lot of work for servos, and he's added some controller properties to reload. So hopefully we get a video on servos again. I think Dan has got one out already, so be sure and look for that one. This is what I just mentioned. Scott changed the wording specifically. Instead of calling them presets, they're called fixed channels, and added support so it works on the moving head effect. Show colors from the color wheel in the MH preset. So if you didn't know, when you create a preset, and that's something different than what we're talking about with fixed channels, if I create a moving head effect here, and there's still work to be done here, these colors were not showing when you chose colors for the moving head. So if you created some pattern here with colors, you said save preset, it would only show you colors if you're using the color picker rather than the color wheel picker. So now that it works for both color wheels and colors. Keith added a filter text to value curve timing track events. I believe that is a case of the VU meter. Put that down here. Go here. You create timing event bars and filters. So if you had, let's just say we added a timing track. We added with tags. Click OK. We want to repeating count. Let's go 6 just to be different. It would create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have the ability to say only fire on the metronome. First of all, I got to click off and back on. That will reload this little drop down. You have a metronome. I can say I only want it to fire on the 4 and the 6. And it will only fire on the 4 and the 6 from here. So you can filter it on whatever you want. And he's added that this filter label to the value curves. So actually what I showed you was on VU meter. He's added it to value curves. So let's demonstrate that. Let's go. It's going to be very similar. What can we do? It's got a value curve on it, probably like single strand effect. Here we go. Place it on here. And number of chases. It won't make any sense, but we'll put it on this one anyway. Timing track toggle. And he's added the filter here. So I want 4,6. So same idea as I showed you on the VU meter, but now it's available on the value curve. It might not make sense to do what I just did there, but wherever you have a value curve, this will now show up as an option to filter on it. So there might be a case where you want to spike something up and down at certain patterns or filters. Prepare audio. This is an old tool that was created back for xLights Around the World, Greatest Showman, which is a couple years ago. Be sure and hit xlightsaroundtheworld.com, by the way, which has just released their song choices. Go to xlightsaroundtheworld.com, and I'll drop that little hint in there. For Russell and the team that do that. Go look at that website and jump on board to that project for this year. Anyway, Prepare Audio is under Tools. Prepare Audio. Right there, and it's going to take what's called a Reaper file or an xAudio file, and it can take in instructions to alter an audio file to, perhaps edit it, shorten it, lengthen it, cut it up, slice it. What that allows is the sequence vendors who encourage you to buy the song from Amazon or whatever, but they may have an edited version. But rather than giving you the edited version, they could give you the script that would tell the system how to cut it and slice it to make the version that they need. Anyway, that's been broken for a number of releases now, but it's been fixed up in the last release here to work on properly on MP3 files, and as well as now on the Macintosh, the M4A and AAC files. So it should all work again going forward. And look forward to the next couple of releases, I think there's a new feature in the pipeline which will allow you to use this feature to, say, add silence at the beginning of the sequence. So maybe you want 5 seconds of silence prior to your sequence starting up. So look for that to be used in the near future. Anyway, that is those 3 items there. Keith has added a new pixel type. I'm guessing that is some new pixel that's available, new type pixel or puck or something. So that's been added to pixel type, and I guess that would be somewhere down in the somewhere in the string properties, or I guess I would have to pick a pixel here. Candy canes, come down. Maybe under the protocols, somewhere in there, probably LB, one of these guys. Some obscure thing that somebody can use for a pixel. Anyway, there you go. Text effect. I added a request here. Go to the sequencer, drop a text effect. Text effect. Let me get my spot here. And let's go to master view. Go to a matrix. Probably make the most sense. Do I have a matrix on here somewhere? There we go. I would add a text effect here. There we go. That's it. Hopefully this will work for us. Testing 1, 2, 3. And get the model preview. This one there. Click on that. And you might do a movement to the left. And what was happening was it would replay over and over and over again, but maybe you just wanted to scroll once and don't show it again. So that's what no repeat's all about. It's just going to show it once and it'll end, hopefully. And I guess I would have to play it to verify. Hopefully that works. Testing 1, 2, 3, and it ends. So it only shows once. So this way you don't have to try and move this just to get it to show once. You can just make it as long as you need it to be, and you know that it's only going to show once. Okay. At the same time, there was an issue with the centering, that it only worked with the OS fonts. So if I go make this here, speed it up, it would go to the center and stop. But if you chose a XL font, these are internally built-in fonts. Maybe people didn't even realize that, but these are built for xLights, very simplistic fonts that are clean and crisp and can be used on your matrices. The centering function never worked for those. So that was added as well in this fix, in this release. So, so just again to recap, if this says use OS font, then this value is used at the top. Otherwise, if you choose something down here, it's an xLights font, and it is going to be used. All right. And right now we do have the ability to center. So if I say up, it's going to go up and go to the center and stop. If I say, now it's going up, up, up. I think if I do no repeats, it should just go up once and then disappear. Boom. So there you go. You can have something show once and not show again. Of course, it's showing multiple times because it's actually repeating this entire effect over and over again. But if you were to play it, you would only see it once. Anyway, that's been a feature request that's been in the pipeline for a couple years now. We got that. Add option to bulk edit groups preview. The preview that is being referred to here in the layout is this preview up here. I'm not sure I have multiple previews, so create a new preview. I'll call it test 1. And I could say I want to do these 3 guys, and I want to add it to bulk edit preview. Hopefully it's here, preview, and I want it to go to my test 1 preview. And there you go. I've added to my test 1 preview. That was a new addition by Alex. The thinking here was, if I'm correct in this, in how I understood it, was you might create a preview called Showstopper props, another one called EFL props, another one called PPD props, and you could have different selections here to choose which props are going to be shown or included. So you might have all your PPD props listed here, and if you're sequencing a showstopper sequence, you might not want them displayed, or groups, specifically groups. You might have PPD groups that you don't use when you are creating a showstopper sequence and vice versa. So you can actually hide those groups from your listing here based on what you have selected. So that's the thinking there. And by adding this option to bulk edit, you can quickly make those, set those previews for your groups. There you go. I have a feeling this is something to do again with the servos, PWM ports to visualizer. I can't tell you any more than what I read here, so that's all I know. Something for behind the scenes in FPP 8, because of the updated OS, the behind the scenes, it's now referring to the HDMI ports in a slightly different manner. So they've changed the nomenclature to say HDMI A #, 1, 2, 3, etc., rather than what you used to be seeing in the outputs. I think I might be able to show that, at least give you the idea. If I say add, maybe I can't. Virtual matrix. It would show up here, FB0, if you had the ability. I don't think I have the ability to show it to you. No, not quickly, but that's where it's going to show up. It's really behind the scenes, shouldn't impact you at all. Adding some key bindings. So this is if you'd like to create your own shortcuts. Doesn't mean they're defined for you, but you have the ability to create your own shortcuts in the key bindings file. So you would have to edit the key bindings file, and you can actually tag a certain key. Now, if you wanted, if you're a serious programmer, a serious sequencer, you can set a shortcut to switch between timing tracks and to unselect them. So that's if you're into setting your own shortcut keys. Scott added a tweak here. This is probably one of the hidden features of this release, to make it so that the sequences are more transferable from props. So if they've created a fan effect or a shockwave, it doesn't mention shockwave, but I'm sure it's in the shockwave as well, and I'll show you, it will be better transferred from one prop to another. So if somebody creates a shockwave or a fan effect on a small prop, and I'm not going to draw it properly, but you get the idea, whatever that is, and you create it on a smaller prop, and all of a sudden it's going to be like a totally different experience. So what Scott has done, and I'm going to encourage all the sequencers out here to perhaps make use of it. And he questioned maybe he should have made it the default, but we don't like to make any assumptions anymore. But if you drop a fan effect, he said it was a fan effect, yeah. Under the options, scale to buffer, what that means is scale to the size of the prop. So when you talk about the radius 1 and radius 2, it's no longer going to be the same 10 units. It's going to be a percentage of that prop. And I'm going to say 10%, but I don't think that's really accurate to say it's 10%, but it is going to be a percentage of the prop. So you have radius 1, radius 2, and it's going to better replicate itself when you copy it from this prop to a different prop that's a different size. So it'll be the same, give you the same feeling, the same general effect, regardless of the size of the prop. Probably more importantly, on a shockwave, when you do a shockwave, you have radius 1, radius 2, width 1, width 2. And if you do it on a matrix, and then you drop that same effect on your whole house, it's going to be a different experience entirely. So now we have the ability to scale to the buffer or scale to the size of the prop. So that's there for you now. Keith added a couple addendums here to the README that is not in the README here, but he wanted to point out, and it's on the xScheduler side. And let me start up xScheduler if I can. I think it's starting up. I'm just going to. So on the xScheduler, he added the virtual matrices. He added a new feature here, and sorry, I'm not an xSchedule user, but he added this from model. So when you created a virtual matrix in xSchedule, you had to go and find the values to put in the height and width, but now you have the ability to actually pull in the size that you have defined in xLights. So I think I have a TV. I do not know what order is this. This looks like it's almost random order, unfortunately. TV here, and it will pull in those values for you. So that might help you get the right values. I did make a note that I don't believe this is supposed to show here. Yeah, that looks like a problem with the display. So I expect that to be addressed in the next release, just a minor little UI issue. Anyway, that's what we have. Oh, there's one other thing that didn't make the release notes, and let me show you that on the new moving head effect. Close this guy. No, we don't need to close. I can just go here and go to the moving head effect. Still a work in progress, but Alex has been working on trying to put some smarts into these pick lists here, and we're trying to get a little more real estate. Unfortunately, he works on a dark mode, and he messed up my non-dark mode, and you can't see the buttons, but the idea is you can select evens, and it would none, and you could select evens, and it would pick just the evens, and I make this over here, and then I can, and now it says evens has been used, so now it turns blue, and I go odds, and I can say I want the odds to be over here, and now you know that you've defined evens and odds for this particular moving head effect. He's going to work on the coloring and such, but that's the idea behind that. I think if I click off the effect, come over here, click on the effect, you can, before you even do anything, you know that you've got defined evens and odds. You could probably tell that as well by looking here. You can see that the odds are defined, evens are defined. You can know that by looking at the status, but it's just much easier just to see this is being set up here. If I do another moving head effect, click on this guy, I probably would want to say all, and maybe I want the all to be here. And now you can see that I have set all on this effect. So if I click here just to verify evens and odds, if I come back to here, I know I've got the all effect. So it's just a quick way to tell what moving heads were defined in that moving head effect, so that you can quickly go back and say, oh, I want to tweak the all here. I want it to be, you know, down towards you. And if I come back here and say, oh, I want to change the evens to make it a little less, I can. And I can go to the odds and maybe move that up here. And there you go. So that's the idea behind this. It looks like we just need a little bit of a UI update to make it more readable. Sorry. That is it. It's not bad. It's what, 2 or 3 weeks, and we got another release. So let's keep things rolling. We had a large number of enhancements and bug fixes there. This is the only thing we currently know about. Although there is an issue we are facing with people trying to import older moving head X models. So be wary of that. If you're on the layout and you try to import, and you import an old X model moving head X model, we're seeing that is crashing things, so we're going to try and address that. Other than that, if you find any issues, let us know. Go to help issue tracker. Feel free to update with any issues that you're facing, if crashes, etc. If you're having crashes or anything of that, it's really, really helpful if you could do a package log files. Not only does that give us the log file, it gives us your layout, so we can replicate it to see if it's a problem with your layout. If it's not a purchase sequence, if you can duplicate your issue with just a couple of steps, then go ahead and do a package sequence and upload that to the issue tracker as well. Because if we can duplicate it in the debugger, we can more apt to solve it quickly. And us amateur developers like myself can find it and perhaps fix it rather than trying to hunt through lots and lots of code to try and solve, or trying to figure out what you did that may have caused xLights to crash, because we can't see everything. Anyway, that's it for today, and thank you, and be sure and spread this around. Don't forget Wednesday nights in the Zoom room at 8 p.m. Eastern, New York City time. We have sessions, Zoom room classes. Don't forget go to xLights Gems, where you'll find this video and the recordings from the xLights Gem sessions on Wednesday night as well. All right, that's all we got for this recording, and see you in the Zoom room.